Please check out our sponsors NordVPN for the best in online security. It's the best VPN on the market, and you can try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee by visiting nordvpn.com/heartandhand. That's nordvpn.com/heartandhand, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host. And joining me this week to discuss what I think it's safe to say is a contrasting week in terms of what's happening off the park compared to what's happening on it is, first of all, David Marshall. Hello, Dave.
How you doing, mate? It's much of the muchness in terms of on the park, but getting a wee bit excited about things off it.
Well, that's no bloody wonder, because there's not a hell of a lot to be excited about on it. And joining me to discuss that as well is Cammy Bell. Hello, Cameron.
Dave, Davey, listeners, pleasure as always.
Wasn't that much of a pleasure to be at Ibrox on Saturday as Rangers continued this recent trend. Our commitment to banter is unrivalled after winning all the time at Ibrox this season, but being unable to do much away. We're now winning away from Ibrox all the time, but can't find our own arse with both hands at Ibrox. Complete role reversal. But Cammy, as you know, for the purposes of this very podcast, I will watch the game back after a day after, when you remove the emotion from it of watching it live. And sometimes it does reveal new things to you. Sometimes you've played better than you thought. Sometimes you maybe haven't played well, but you weren't as bad as we thought. That was not the case with this watch back. Rangers were really bad, really genuinely bad. And by that, I mean miscontrolled touches, bad passes, not making runs, looking for someone who should be in a position but isn't there, turning and starting again all the time, taking the easy ball, and then quite often playing it badly, making poor decisions all over the pitch. A bunch of guys who looked disconnected. They didn't look to have any idea what was going to happen. Mistakes were being made all over the park. It was truly dreadful, the first 45 minutes. And Barry Ferguson afterwards, I think, was slightly taken aback at just how bad it was, as he probably thought, as most observers would, and at most clubs it'd be true, coming off that victory at Rugby Park and the manner in which it was achieved, that the side would go into this game confidently. But again, another truly awful start, conceding a terrible goal. And I tweeted on Saturday, and a watch back has not changed my mind on this, that you've got a goalkeeper who's chucking one in fairly regular, a defence that looks absolutely terrified anytime any team approaches them to potentially put in a tackle, a midfield that just doesn't function, and attackers that aren't creating very much. It's a bad team playing badly.
Yeah, that's for sure. I also watched it back as well, and your synopsis is 100% accurate. The key words that I think we've used for months now across various pods has been sloppy, and I'm not seeing anything to change that. I'm not going to defend Philippe Clement, because I think he wrote his own story, but there has to be now a real focus on what these players are producing, because these are unforced errors that, by and large, from a group of players that look far beneath levels that we know that they're capable of. I don't know if it's a mood. I don't know if it's just an overabundance of carelessness. I can accept the fact that we're not as physically strong as we need to be, and I can accept the fact that when better opposition come, there's very little you can do about it. But more recently, especially as you mentioned there, David, at home, we should be playing with more confidence. We've got tens of thousands behind the team. And irrespective of what shit show this season has been thus far, I'm still convinced that there are fans who are willing the team on to be able to do that. And there's very little that you can do to pay that back if you're not willing to take care of the ball, if you're not willing to make, basic passes become just your absolute bread and butter. And if this was a free-flowing Rangers team that were trying things, and we've talked about it before, about, being brave and taking risks and being able to do all of that, then we could understand that. But right now, it is the core fundamentals that for me are just, they're absolutely missing in action. There's a litany of mistakes happening throughout the entire team, from back through to front. And no one fears now coming to Ibrox. No one fears playing Rangers, whether it's at home or away. And something has to be done with that. How much control Barry Ferguson and his team will have over that, we'll look forward to seeing. But as we're going to go back into the Europa League now, we can't let this continue. It's just, we will get swept aside by Fenerbahce. And right now, as things stand, I'm not wholly convinced about how well we can do domestically for the remaining 9 games of the season either.
Well, on that, Dave, it struck me on Saturday that there are similarities. You're too young to remember April 1986, but between that and one you will remember, which was March 2015, and both these occasions there was news of massive change coming to the club. The first was with Souness, and the second with Dave King and the Three Bears with the Takeover. And the second one is quite appropriate in that we had April 86, Stuart Wallace left, Alex Totten took over the reins, and Stuart McCall came in as interim manager in March 2015. And it's this sort of strange juxtaposition in that the fans are feeling one way, which is quite upbeat and excited, and finally some good news and light at the end of the tunnel. And we assume that the players will feel the same and you'll get that response, but you don't. Well, you didn't on those 2 occasions, Rangers famously losing at frigging Clydebank, and then we were truly dreadful. And Stuart McCall, I think, couldn't believe quite the standard of performance he was getting. And I think part of it is that we are all excited and saying, yeah, here comes this takeover, things are going to be different, things are going to improve, and it is exciting. But for many of those players, they're not going to be a part of it. Some of them will be leaving it out of contract in the summer. Others will be sold. Others may still be around for a bit, may take a window or two to shift them, but they're not going to be playing a significant part in it. To me, that team on Saturday, it reminded me of in an office that's closing, and everybody's just going through the motions. You're still turning up, you're still getting paid for it, but your head isn't there.
Yeah, I've been in that position myself, and when you're told with 2 months to go you're losing your job, you're not wanting your panning to do the best jobs you can, you're counting down the days. It does seem to be that feeling, and there's a part of me, Davey, if we go on now and we put in a performance against Fenerbahce, one hand I'll be delighted if we win, obviously, but there's going to be a wee part of me that's going to feel cheated, because that's really what this team have done all season. They've really slugged their way through the domestic games and turned up in the European games. And, I suppose we've got a right to feel cheated about in that way. And I can understand there is a human element to this, David. As you said, if these guys know that they're not going to be here next year, that their days at Rangers are numbered, there's a human element in that, well, obviously, even, subconsciously, they're not going to be given 100% or busting a gut. But where, I think that argument falls down a wee bit is they've been doing this all season. I think, you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head, sorry, in your first statement when we came on the show today. This is purely a bad team playing badly. How does that then translate to good European performances? Because the expectation is different in Europe. We have the punching above our weight cliche has been used a lot when we've been in Europe, and to an extent it's true. But the real measure of a Rangers team and Rangers player is what they can do in Scotland week in, week out. And these guys, they're masquerading as Rangers players.
Yeah, they are. And a part of that is the fact that Rangers are so easy to play against. Now, over the, Barry's not had much time to change it, so I'm not putting too much blame his way. But I'm looking at that team on Saturday, and you've got 2 left-backs playing, both of whom are shit out of form, incidentally. You've got Tavernier, a right-back, playing at centre-half. You've got 2 in the middle of the park, unsupported. You've then got 4 forwards, none of whom are particularly quick. You've got Hadji, who is playing out in the wing, but isn't a winger, doesn't give you width. You've got Czerny, again, shit out of form. Hasn't played as much football in this in a few years, and I think you can tell. And looks very, very jaded indeed. And it looked like an odds and sods side, Cammy. And like I say, the basics just weren't there right from the start. It isn't helped when you concede a goal the way we do in the first goal. Desser's miscontrolling it. It's Desser's, there's no point getting upset about that. It's what he does. Sometimes he does brilliant things, other times he does dreadful things. But Butland's attempt at saving it was horrendous. I mean, it's actually worse when you watch it back than it looked at the time, because he has to go some to put it back out for the boy to knock it in, because if it doesn't have the pace to the shot is so poor, it's straight at him and has no pace, that if he just allowed it to hit his body and put his arms behind his back, it wouldn't have ran as far out because there wasn't enough pace on it to do that. He gets into such a muddle that he somehow ends up kind of half blocking, half scooping it out, and we concede a goal. And straight away, Ibrox is going, Jesus. Now, Barry Ferguson said after it, okay, things like that can happen. There's 80 minutes left, but you didn't see it. He said it was edgy. The other way to put it in a more Scottish vernacular, and maybe a bit cruel, is that they shat themselves. They panicked and they kind of went, oh my God, it's happening again. And for the rest of that half, I thought we were absolutely physically dominated by Motherwell at Ibrox, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah, it's a team that struggles to take a punch, I think, at times. And the Butland error, I mean, Desser's, you're right. I don't think anyone was surprised when they saw Cyril Dessers miscontrol the ball and then immediately were in the back foot. What was really surprising to me, though, was it just looked so easy. It was almost a well hit pass back that was the original shot that came in. Butland almost feels, if he felt that he could, get down on the floor to be able to pick up, then for me, he assessed that as, this isn't as fast as I need to do to clear it with my feet, or to put it to one side or whatever, I can scoop this up. And he makes a total hash of it, falls out to the Motherwell player, and it's a straightforward finish. For me, Davy Butland needs dropped. I wouldn't. There is an argument to say that Fenerbahce is a little bit too soon for Liam Kelly to be able to come in, but as things stand at the moment, we gave Butland a little bit of a bye when we had such a change in terms of who was playing in front of him. Makes a huge error with Tav playing in at centre half when you were at Old Trafford as well. That was really problematic. So my hope would have been that he could have got a more settled defence in front of him. That makes it easier. But to your point, he is absolutely out of form just now, and he just, it's unacceptable. If he doesn't trust the defence in front of him, okay, fine. But my expectation would be then that he steps up and he makes sure that he's not making errors that caused these problems, and he absolutely did. It was just horrendous from start to finish. And again, watching it back, watching it at the game, I thought maybe he just doesn't see it, or maybe he just misjudges or whatever. There's far too much time for him to be able to make that assessment to
it's awful. It's just,
to forgive the mistake.
It's a pass back. I mean, it's a really poor effort from the Motherwell player, and it's, and it sets the tone, because it's not even a goal goes in, it's the type of goal. Because yet again, Rangers are losing some dreadful goals where a lot of it is down to the fact that we're doing things that professional football just shouldn't. Second, a case in point, Tavernier misplaces a pass, Jeffty's gone wandering, and boom, you're 2-0 down. Really basic stuff, Dave, that you expect. And like I say, the passing from Rangers is scared. You can see it is frightened and inhibited. But even the ones that are finding a teammate are bad passes because they're always behind them. They're never allowing a player to get it and run on. The amount of times a pass went to somebody who had to spin back to get it, to collect it, turn, and then go again. And it slowed down the play immensely. Rangers couldn't get anything going in the first half. Second half, there was a bit of an improvement, but that was partially due to Motherwell retreating and saying, look, we don't think you can break us down twice. And as it turned out, they were right. But generally speaking, our passing isn't great. It's not up to... And this is something I want to talk about today, and that is something that a listener brought up on our Patreon site. He emailed in and said, David, I think Niels Coppin has got away with a lot this year because there's been so much other or so many other things that have been wrong that people have tended to look at the manager and the players and the board, and these are all very valid things to look at. But his recruitment now across 3 windows, he doesn't appear to have understood a fundamental issue that Rangers face in Scotland, which is you have to be able to look after yourself physically. And that a lot of the players he's brought in are very small, comparatively, very technical, don't have power, don't have pace. They're very slow players as well. And that when you look at the teams coming to Ibrox, or even when we go away, you look at the two sides and you think, Christ, set pieces, they're going to be all over us because they do have significant height advantage. And I do wonder. I asked Barry in the press conference afterwards, do you think this? Because this is not and he said, no, you're right. And he goes, I love technical, talented players, but you also need to stand up and win your battles. And he said, we've got John Suter coming back, Leon Balogun's back, Dujon's coming back, so that'll at least give me some more physicality. And basically an admission on that. I can't quite get the thinking of it, because in Scotland, I'm not saying that you sign 11 Curtis Mains, right? Yeah. You do need technical players, but if you have to have a balance within a football team, it's a jigsaw. So yes, someone might be a good player, but you have to take into account our league and the team they're going into. So yes, of course, you can have a couple of smaller lads that are technical. You can have somebody that's not the quickest. If you balance that out elsewhere in the side with other people who have the qualities that they don't, this Rangers team doesn't. It's much of a muchness. And when teams exploit the things it doesn't have, we don't appear to have an answer to it.
Yeah, the thing on Coffin is, it's the old, exam question. Make sure you're answering the question you're being asked, and I don't think he's done that for his recruitment. They always want to pick on Robert Propper, a centre-half in Scotland with absolutely no physicality about him is no use. It's as simple as that. We are going to be going up against teams full of cluggers and big physical guys. And, I can understand the argument. Well, if you've got a good enough football team there, then you can play around that. Well, one, we don't. And secondly, the way you beat Rangers right now is purely through hard work and physicality. And it should take more than that to beat Rangers, but it doesn't. Niels Coffin is, as you say, we're 3 windows into this now, and you'd really struggle to pick out a full-blown success. I think at best you can say his better signings have been all right to potential, and that's what we're hanging a hat on. And I include guys like Igman, and that where he's going to be a really good player for us or not is still to be determined, but there is potential there, so you need to give time to let that breathe. But the bigger signings, or who we'd expect to be more established first team players coming in, it's just not been there. Again, I need to go back to it, but I don't understand how someone in his position can look at a guy like Robin Propper, scout him, do all the analysis you do in that job, work out all your reports, and come to the conclusion, yep, he's going to be a good fit for Scottish football. I can't wrap my brain around that at all.
I think that the hope is with Coppin, though, and I do get it, because he is probably looking at it with one eye, Dave, on how to have almost a European team that can fit into that. Because if you put in, absolute bodies in there who will certainly win your physical battles, but they'll struggle to keep up with some of the guys when you're playing on the European stage, then that I get. I think for me, and this is kind of what I'm curious to get your thoughts on as well, as to whether or not we can allow Coppin next summer to continue on that trend, or whether or not we have to be able to say to him, you're going to have to be able to bring guys in who can have a physicality, can play football, but at the same time as well won't get overawed, that even if it's a domestic game that could be a tough one, that you're going to have to roll your sleeves up and get into and show some hard work and some graft, we're going to have to put the flair to one side for a bit. We need to be able just to make sure that we can win games with this. So it's on Coppin to be able to get that right, because he'll live or die by those decisions. But I think, as you've kind of both alluded to, it doesn't work in what he's bringing in at the moment.
Yeah.
The model is not right.
Can I just say, Cammy, sorry.
Sorry, go on, Dave.
Just on that as well, talking about the idea of this building a European side, that to me, it's putting the curtains up before you've got the windows in, Like, you need to get the basics first. You need to get a team domestically sorted, which he hasn't done. And the larger issue around Coppin as well, I think it'd be hard to, blame the guy or give him any great extent of blame for where we are. But I certainly say he's a symptom of it. This is a guy that hasn't done this job before, has been promoted to probably above his means experience and his know-how, and we are where we are because of decisions like that. That's not entirely his fault. He's just, the wrong guy, the wrong place because of decisions above him.
Yeah, Dave, I think you're absolutely right. I think at Rangers, we've had a lot of people who are in the wrong movie. And I think Robin Propper's a very good example of that. That he's a guy who clearly has ability, but he just is not right for what we need. And considering we were moving Ben Davis out the door, who was very similar, and that clearly a good player doing very well at Birmingham, not right for the Scottish League. Lessons don't get learned, and yet Coppin gets promoted because that seemed to be what Rangers just did. Who was there? And if they hung about, then they found themselves getting up. This is not going to happen under the new guys. That's the thing. Rangers are not going to be running this way anymore. They're going to be run professionally. People will have to justify why they are there in the building. And usually with a takeover, you'll hear sound bites about, everyone starts with a fresh... everyone gets a fresh start, I don't believe that's the case. I think that they will be looking at it and say, right, okay, what's went wrong? What do we need to do to improve? You're in charge of this department that hasn't worked. Goodbye. So I think that there is a legitimate case to say we are starting off by buying the wrong building blocks and then wondering why the building keeps collapsing. But as I say, I look at the side and it's this mishmash of players, some playing in different positions. You look at it and you go, it's not very physically strong. It won't dominate in the air. It isn't quick either. The technical players who are in the team aren't good enough technically to put to make up for those other defects. And teams have routinely this season, as you both mentioned domestically, found us quite straightforward to play against. Motherwell's a great case in point here. We've played Motherwell now 4 times, and the results are 2-1 to Rangers, 2-1 to Rangers, both after needing to get both after, firstly, Motherwell equalised, secondly, Motherwell scored first, 2-2, and now we lost 2-1. There has not been a huge gap between us and Motherwell in these 4 matches. So Motherwell have found us comparatively straightforward to play against, and it hasn't mattered where the match has been. And I think when you are starting off with, as I say, the wrong building blocks, you are going to build something that simply doesn't work. Now, Barry Ferguson spoke after the match very eloquently. He didn't put the boot in to the players, but he didn't sugarcoat it either, nor did he say that everything was great and we had so many shots in goal or anything like that. He was very open and very honest. But he did mention that you need attributes to play at Rangers that are more than just being a good player. You need to be strong, and that is something that we haven't seen with this particular bunch. And Cammy, realistically, over the next couple of months, I think it's a case of just trying to wring out what you can from this squad before making the changes, or beginning to make the changes in the summer, because I don't look round the squad and say, well, you could play him and you could play, and he's not been featuring, other than perhaps using this opportunity and saying, do you know what, we're going to breed 2 or 3 of the youngsters because he's at least quick, for example, right? We'll put Curtis in because he's quick. That's the only thing I can see us getting out of this. Now, we're going to finish second. I know that some of our more kind of pessimistic fans will say, we might not. Well, we're 16 points clear with, 9 games to play. It's not going to happen. But you need to try and get something at the end of the season. And even if it is just, well, he got minutes or whatever, that's surely better than continuing with the same guys and one week they won't let you down, the next they will, and not knowing what you're going to get.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a big benefit of Ferguson being in role at the moment is that when you look at his pathway, when he obviously came through and the success that he hit, and becoming an excellent captain of Rangers, it was because he was in and around squads that won 9 in a row. He was featured within teams that had their main domestic opposition going through their degrees of changeovers and all that kind of stuff, and how you then progress into a new look Rangers side. So he's seen a lot of these changes already. I think he would be an advocate of being able to bring in some of those the youth players who I think can hold their own in terms of some of these games. There would be no harm with it as long as we felt it wasn't going to regress their own development. But right now, this Rangers team is so shaky, it doesn't surprise me that he wants to be able to hold a number of these players to account. I think the most important thing I think he can do, David, is understand what the players want out the back of this. The players who, as you mentioned already, know that they're leaving. Okay, that's fine. If they are just going to phone it in for the rest of the season, that isn't good enough. So straight away, your place is at stake. There is obviously the issues that you boys have mentioned in terms of players out of form, players coming back for injury, who's available for selection, all the rest of it. I understand that. He made the obvious decision on Saturday not to include Inciala. My hope is that we'll continue to stick by him, because I do think, despite some of his mistakes, he's on a learning curve and that he will progress into being a very useful asset for Rangers. We were talking about that when we saw him come through to the team and he was contributing. So that's another player who I think, for me, should still feature within Ferguson's thoughts. The most important thing he has to be able to try and understand now is, if those players who are going to be here come August, what are you willing to do to take the responsibility now for being part of that team going forward? How are you reacting to these defeats, to a low mood in the camp, however else you want to be able to try and address it, is going to be part of that character. And Barry Ferguson knows a hell of a lot about character within dressing rooms. So it will be interesting for me to see how he chooses to be able to react. My fear after the game was that he was going to come out and he was going to come out angry. And I think that he would have every right to be. He's a fan like, you two guys, myself, everyone listening to this, who cannot be happy at what he's seeing. Plus, he has now got a personal involvement within this. So I'm almost glad he came out tempered and he was calm and he was honest. And those are the things that we want to hear from him. I think he's probably bewildered, Davey, at what he's seeing and not really getting an understanding of why these players who have got a privilege to play for Rangers just seem to think as if a subpar performance is acceptable, and looking around the dressing room and just being, so afraid of making mistakes and not holding each other accountable for, dips and being able to right ships, even if it's in game. It must be totally alien to him in terms of some of the teams that he featured in. So the most important thing, I think, for Ferguson now is to be able to get that dressing room back on side, steered in the right direction. We know that players will leave, but for those who are planning on staying and want to build a future at Rangers, how do you prove it, as soon as possible?
I wonder if there's a bit of a catch-22 on that, because you're absolutely right. I think for most of us, we'd be thinking, right, well, if you're concerned about changes here and whether or not you'll be a part of it, you would really want to go out and just 100% show that you deserve it. You would go out there with that attitude in every match. But then the stuff we've been talking about, the edginess, the weakness, the mentality, that's why they won't do that. They've shown before they don't have that type of attitude. This is what happens whenever they feel threatened or challenged, that they go into their shells. So I suppose it's just a logical consequence of a side who, when they have found themselves up against it domestically, have continually done this, is that when they find themselves challenged in a bigger fashion, they'll react the same way. I suppose it's just their nature. Dave, moving on then, we've had the news that the takeover has been agreed in principle. It's now at the due diligence stage and everything is agreed. So everyone hopeful of having this deal done in time for the summer. I think the date that had always been said since this broke has been June. I think that's what they're aiming for, and there doesn't seem to be any reason that won't happen. In terms of moving the club forward, I don't think it's going to be an overnight transition that suddenly you've got new owners and all of these problems that we've discussed ad nauseum for the last few seasons on here go away. It's more to me about the confidence that you have people who, first of all, will recognise that there is problems, because I think that's been a big thing at Rangers, just trying to pretend they're not there and hope it goes away. And it's more about, to me, just having dynamism, having a plan and saying, look, we want to get here and here's how we envision doing it, right? There will be bumps in the road. We know that. That's the nature of this particular business. But we will stick to this. We've got an idea and this is what we want to do, as opposed to just, let's see if we can survive to next Monday, which I think has been, certainly the last 3 years, has been the policy at Rangers.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. What excites me about it is the fact that the people coming into the club, wanting to take a majority share, they are sports business people. They specifying that they know how to run a sports organisation, which is where I think, the current board made up of the majority shareholders and whatnot are not. I don't think there's been any maliciousness from, the money men running Rangers over the past few years. I simply think they're not very good at running a football club. They've tried their best, but unfortunately, I think we've seen time and time and again, they just don't have it. These people coming in seem to know what they're doing. They will act with a different level of professionalism. What we've seen, it will be run as a professional sports organisation. There's going to be things, as you say, David, it isn't going to be a change overnight. There's probably going to be things that will happen that either we don't agree with as fans or it's going to take some time to get in use with. But at the very least, I think these people coming in, what they can potentially do, at the very least, it's going to get us on an upwards trajectory again.
Yeah, and Marat was asked at the Financial Times conference the other week about this, and of course he wouldn't be drawn on it, which is, we're not going to sit and talk about it till it's done, let's be honest. But he was asked about feeder clubs, which I think was a legitimate worry that we had of, will we be used as a feeder club for leases? He said, no, we don't agree with that, but we do agree with sharing intel, knowledge, data, metrics, whatever you want to call it in the modern, best practice, all of these things. And to be honest, Cammy, that's what excites me, because I've kind of looked at Rangers the last few years and thought, and then looked at maybe down south or even clubs in smaller countries comparative to this, and thought, we are a dinosaur. We have never got over the fact that it isn't the 1990s anymore.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was worried I was going to be the only person that sounded like a geek on this pod. I'm enthralled, be able to see what the changes will be on that, because you're right. There's so many gaps that need plugged across all of our systems and methodologies across the club, that being able to bring in an external body that have now got a vested interest in seeing those gaps plugged is music to my ears. And, I think as Dave touched on there as well, the element to this now is you're going to have a support structure in place for your infrastructure. So in other words, if they can come in and say that is not doing well, we have got this system in place elsewhere and it works beautifully, implement it, then absolutely fantastic. And I've been a huge subscriber, Davey, for many, many a year, that some of the best ideas are stolen ones. So if they can come in and provide us with that intel, with that, the practice that has been trialed and errored, but now absolutely works up to that point, it gives us a huge foothold and a progression for some of those areas that have been so underperforming for so many years. And it's either been because the system doesn't work, or the guy who's been there forever and a day and has probably moved around jobs and he's kind of worked himself into a certain position, but we know him, so he's all right, so we couldn't dream of getting rid of him. Now everyone has to be held to account for what works and what doesn't. So I think being able to have access to all of that now should help us improve efficiencies. I understand that's all very corporate talk, and please ask for your forgiveness for that. But in this particular model, it absolutely needs done. And so therefore, if it's going to help us gain that edge wherever we possibly can, by Christ, we need it.
Yeah, it's things like structures, Dave, that, well, we never did this in the past, so why would we do it now? Because the game's moved on. That's why. Because things have changed. Players are different. You can't manage them now as you could back in, the 1990s, for example. Everybody is different. And if everyone else are doing these things that give you advantages, even small advantages, and we are not, they all accrue and they all add up. And it's just struck me over the last few years that we make life harder for ourselves rather than easier at times.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that's been said there. As someone who was too young to appreciate 9 in a row, I joke about you boys, go, oh God, here we go again, the 90s. But I agree. I don't think as a club we ever moved on for that. And even as somebody that never really saw at the time, I'm as guilty as well, because I can't tell you how many times as a kid I sat watching the 9 in a row VHSs, thinking, God, I wish it was back then now, even when we were still pretty good and winning things fairly frequently. We need to modernise as a football club. I think, one of the big failings we've had since 2012 is we've never took that chance to do a total restart and modernise the club. So obviously factors that's been built into that. We were ran by charlatans for so many years. We were then in a rebuild and survival stage when good guys came in. When Gerrard came in, he did a lot of modernising, but we never fully committed to that as a club, particularly after he left, and that's where we are now. And we have been trying to, for so long, go back to these glory days, but let's leave the glory days in the past. Let's do something new. Let's do something different and create a better future rather than try to get back to where we were.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being aware and learning from history, but you can't become a prisoner to it.
Yeah.
And we're not alone in that. I look at Manchester United, and that's been their default for a number of years, just continually harking back the way to Ferguson and the great days rather than looking forward. And we've been very guilty of that. And I think that there is an inherent suspicion of progress and modernisation in Scottish football in general. Not just with us, but I think us, it's been harming us. And I think that we have always said, well, this has been good enough for X amount of years. Why isn't it good enough now? Because it isn't, because the evidence tells you that. And we might not like the way football has changed. There's loads about it I don't like, but that doesn't mean it hasn't changed. It doesn't mean that you can't look at that. And because the people who've been in charge of us maybe didn't subscribe fully to change and to things that need done, and by that I mean instinctively within their heart, then it meant there wasn't always going to be that push for it. When you have owners who are a bit more distant and, let's be honest, a bit more dispassionate about it, who don't have X amount of years of supporting Rangers in the background, you'll lose certain things, but the hope is that you get then that more analytical eye across it, Cammy, that more, as I say, dispassionate look at it and say, yeah, that's great that it worked, but that's not relevant to us or to me here today in 2025. Whereas we know that this works elsewhere and these are the things. And that doesn't mean you don't be aware of the bits and bobs that make Rangers so special. You need to be aware of that and the type, little things that Rangers fans subscribe to and that make our club special. You need to be aware of things like the type of league we play in, all of these things. I don't mean it's one size fits all, but it is still saying that, right, okay, we're cognizant of all that. Equally, though, we know we need to do this because any football club in the world who has ambitions in 2025 need to do this. And it's about marrying the two up.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is being able to connect global and parochial in terms of, you're right, there's wee niches about what makes Rangers, and there's elements of it where, some things will work and some things will be fit for purpose, and that's all well and good. But if you're not willing to be able to progress forward and you're not willing to develop and to evolve, and I think that's a key word I would use here, Davey, is you're going to be standing still. And ultimately, we are not in a position of unbridled success across recent history where we can be able to turn our noses up at that. And yeah, you'll have some high points, and whether or not you're going to count that as 55 or Seville and all of these things, that's fine. But the challenge that we've had and where we've fallen short is that when we've reached some of those highs, we've failed to re-establish our benchmark that is the level, and then we move on from that, and then we move on from that. It's been a case of, right, well, we've had some of these, and you can throw a League Cup in there and a Scottish Cup, and that's lovely, but it's not sustained. And so then you have to go back to the drawing board and say, right, what do we need to change to be able to do that? And whilst I appreciate that, it's not an easy thing to do when we've been so tight on money and we've had investor fatigue and we've had everything else. I do get it. But right now, as things stand, we can't be glib about this idea of an external body being able to come in and say, we can now help you progress forward. And this is the means by which to do it. And they're not trials. They're not things that will go on a whim and see what happens. We've been able to have proven success in this elsewhere. And that, for me, is music to my ears, because it will see us develop and it will see us move on to next levels, hopefully. There's obviously things at ground level we need to fix first, and those will be the priority areas. And my hope is that, when that all comes into place, it gets done as quickly as possible, but it's not going to happen overnight. And that's what I think people need to remember. It's going to take a lot of time for some of those changes to be able to bed in permanently. So we know where we live. We know we've got this wee bubble within Glasgow and Scotland that we demand success to be able to try and get there now. But if anything has tried the fans' patience already so far, it's across the course of this season for sure.
Although the best thing I think about the Takeover, Dave, is just how unbothered Celtic fans are about it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've literally seen hundreds of them on social media telling how unbothered they are and how it's not even going to happen anyway. So I don't even know why we're talking about it, really.
Oh, it's not going to happen. We're an evil club at 49ers on Twitter. Not bothered. Oh, and do you know the religion of one of the guys coming in?
Yeah,
they don't care. They just don't care.
Don't care. No, and you would be a fool if you said that they did. But
personally, I'm always writing 600-word tweets on things I don't care about, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, exactly. I do love that. It's like, well, no happen now. I've sent an angry tweet to the 49ers account. That'll definitely scupper a £100 million deal. Right then, folks, that will do us for this week here on Heart and Hand. Cammy will be here later in the week with Heart and Hand Extra after Rangers take on Fenerbahce. Now, we won't have our usual show this time next week because obviously, unfortunately, we are not playing this weekend, having been knocked out of the Scottish Cup, but that doesn't mean things stop. Plenty of content over on our Patreon site, patreon.com/heart and hand. My thanks to Mike Lee and Paul Myers, our producers, and my thanks to our wonderful two guests today. First of all, Cameron Bell.
Thank you, buddy. And
to David Marshall.
Yeah, I was thinking that unfortunately we got knocked out of the Scottish Cup, but fortunately we're not playing this weekend, so swings and roundabouts, eh?
Exactly. Yeah. Roll on, June. Anyway, thanks for listening, folks. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.